Featherstone, London,
Lee possibly.
Lee or Toronto or Halifax. Yeah. I don't see coaching changes happening at most of those clubs, so it's probably Lee or Halifax. No, sorry, Lee or Toronto in a weird way, because they're the ones that seem more volatile potentially, that an opening might come up. The final one.
Yeah, I suppose there is potential at Halifax, depending on what happens. If Darryl Powell got the Leeds job, you'd expect Richard Marshall would move up into the Cass job by virtue of him sort of hanging around there and whatever, and then it could well set off a chain of events where all three of them swap.
That's possible. We'll just do the last one first and talk about this one, and then have a little bit of a chat about who next. Alan Thompson at Tombo1987 said, all down to piss poor recruitment as well, so Gary Hetherington has to take some of the slack also. So I think that's an interesting point, that there's been a few weak signings.
They've not strengthened in the obvious areas where everyone said that's what Leeds need. They've not necessarily gone and done that in the last 2 to 3 years, have they?
Well, I think one of the crucial things is they replaced 2016, 2017 Danny Maguire with a 2010, 2011 Danny Maguire. They didn't replace what they lost in the current player with that. They replaced it with a Richie Myler who plays maybe a bit more like Maguire played then, and whether they needed something a bit more dominating of the rest of the team around him. Not to criticise what Richie Myler's done in the side. I think he's played really, really well this year when he's had the opportunity to, but what he hasn't done is control games from a passage of time, from field position territory, through all that sort of stuff. So, and Joel Moon isn't going to do that for you either.
No, and Joel Moon was one I was going to mention, that he's filled in well as a stopgap at the end of last season when they had all those injuries. But would he have been better trying to stick as a centre back to what he did this season possibly, and then bring someone in that slot who could be a commanding half and alongside Richie Myler possibly?
I mean, what I don't know is what the salary cap situation had got to at that point. Yeah. Maybe they'd stocked up on basically re-upping a lot of these younger players. But you'd have thought, I don't know, it just seems a bit surprising, and they haven't really been in the market for anyone that's impressive, but that market doesn't exist the same way as it did, say, 10 years ago when they signed Danny Abattoir. So it's not like those players are walking around waiting for a club, but at the same time you'd think that Leeds have got enough cachet to have made a splash signing at some point, or even have been in the market for maybe someone like what's his name?
I was thinking Warrington. Jackson Hastings, although that's sort of all fallen through with Huddersfield. When you've got someone like that who's fallen out of an NRL side, he'd be prime for an offer.
Yeah, and he's fallen out just because of a personality clash. Appreciate a second chance somewhere, kind of like we've seen people like Ben Barber have grasped their sort of second chances.
Chrissy Sandow the first time round.
Yeah, so there's an element to that. I mean, also they've signed a lot of forwards who they don't seem to then be confident enough in playing. And have just slipped away over the years. There was Yates, there was Baldwinson. They're two that spring to mind immediately. What did they really add? And if they weren't going to give him a chance, why sign him in the first place?
True, yeah.
But yeah, next coach then.
I mean, of that list of the favourites, I mean, there's
Ferner jumps out as an absolute obvious candidate.
Yeah, he's another one who does seem to get linked to every job going at the moment. But
I think it's because he's had a little bit of a taste as a head coach. He's kind of in a Steve Price situation, and maybe the way Price is actually doing reasonably well at Warrington, it adds into that mix. Yeah. I'd be surprised if it goes beyond that.
I mean, Darryl Powell, I can't see what his motivation for leaving necessarily would be, other than to prove everybody right from all the barracking he got the first time round.
Finish the job he started first time round. Because really, he was the guy who brought through that golden generation and set things up, and didn't get any of the credit, really, it felt like, in the end. And also go to a club who have actually experienced of getting over that hump and winning the big trophies at the end of the year in the big finals.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ben Walker's quite an interesting one, obviously, because he comes from that, the idea that he might come from a sort of slightly more unconventional bent in terms of his coaching philosophy and do some little things a little bit more different. Certainly if he's anything like his two brothers are over at Ipswich and the game plan that they're playing, that's very exciting and different. So if he's coming at the same bent from there, I think that could be really interesting to watch, if nothing else.
Yeah, and it's a little bit less known. I just hope the fans give whoever comes in a chance, because like we were talking about, the McDermott Out Brigade has been out in force, and don't get me wrong, he's not always been perfect, but his record is second to none. And that's...
I'd be interested, your take on it, because you've obviously got much more, I call it adversarial relationship than I have. So it's quite interesting to find out. Is it, I'm presuming it's someone who you quite respect as an opponent, and are you sad to see him go or happy to see him go?
I still don't really understand what within the way the Leeds operated was McDermott, and what was the culture that had been established, and the leading players within that. And if this year's is anything to go by, and the last time that they lost a raft of senior players as well is anything to go by, then there's a bit of a cultural vacuum at times, and he maybe has lost some of his key rising stars from being
because they kind of haven't,
and coming through and pushing onto that
next
level.
They haven't got a middle rank,
Stevie
have
Ward,
they?
who seems like a real determined general for him. Everyone else has moved on by the wayside. Even people like Paul McShane, could have been people who he would have been getting into the side who dropped out there. You've got the situation with Hardacre, you've got the situation with Jordan Lilly. There's been a few instances that there was a strong feeling that Sutcliffe might have left last year. He certainly hasn't kept up to the same standards, and so
even the ones like Chris Clarkson over at KR and Thomas Minns and those sort of players as well. There is that kind of that next middle rank. Not your stars,
Jimmy
but
Kindless has gone, and he seemed to be a player who actually they could have done with. So it's really interesting from that regard. But then you can't say that success had nothing to do with him. So you've got to respect him for that.
Yeah.
I'd love to see, and he did a really good job at London, I thought, whilst he was there. I would love to see him take on a job of a team that needs a bit more discipline about them, a bit more drive and will about them, and see where he can push that team to. And maybe there are teams out there like that, like Lee. Maybe he gets involved in a more senior position back at London or something. I do think that it would be a good idea for him to bring that back in, because he definitely had a lot of time and passion for the London situation.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously watched him very closely when he was at London. By virtue of that's where I was able to get along to at the time, and just you couldn't fault him for his passion and his respect for the wider ecosystem of rugby league as well in the area. It wasn't just about the team; he was quite engaged with all the rest of the community clubs and making sure that things like community clubs getting a chance to play on the pitch beforehand, making sure making sure that players went out and did coaching sessions. He was very big on that. And that kind of cultural stuff and respecting that wider thing. And I think it's shown it as well with his work with the States as well, that he's willing to go and do the kind of slightly more unusual things, but in the wider interest of the game.
The international game is another option, another avenue where potentially jobs might come up. It seems like people aren't secure in those positions just because there's not a lot of money, is there, in it, and that sort of stuff.
No, and
he might fancy a bit of time.
Irregularity of it as well. Yeah.
He might fancy a bit of time on that side of things, where he can maybe take a bit of a lower wage and
have a break, refresh himself, develop some further coaching ideas as well. Perhaps go and spend some time, do what some others have done, and spend some time across other sports to develop themselves, and then come back ready for the next challenge.
Definitely, yeah. It'll be interesting to see. The biggest issue with Leeds is that they've done this without any kind of
forward planning.
And I know most sackings do happen in that sort of environment, but
it's very
not
un-Leeds.
like they're on the cusp of going down. They're on the cusp of being in a competition that they're very credibly going to perform strong enough in to be okay. You would have thought.
Realistically, they've got to finish fourth. They've got to finish third or fourth in that top competition. So,
well, they'd
how many wins
finish in the top 5 places, and you back the Leeds Rhinos in a one-off game if it came to that. Anyway.
So I think it is a bit of knee-jerk in that way. But I don't know. I mean, we don't know the full story of what went on and what was discussed. It could well have been that it was put to him, we'd like you to move on at the end of the season because of everything. We think it's time. No, and then he could have been. Then he said, I mean, we're purely speculating here, but he could have said, well, you know what? Don't bother. I'm going now.
That's not my assessment of the situation. I think if there's any kind of I don't know. I don't. That's not my assessment of the situation. I think he's been told we're not happy with the way results are going. What do you think we can do to turn it around? I don't know. I think everything's fine. Get out the door then. That sort of thing. That's the way I'd be seeing it. To me.
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably never know that side of thing. I don't know if you saw the interview that Gary Hetherington did with Alex Simmons this morning.
No, I did not.
I had a chance to catch that. Obviously, you've been at work all day, but it was not dissimilar to Ian Lennigan interviewing himself. It was pretty much the same kind of thing, just he had someone to do it for him. It was like, what question would you like me to answer now, Gary? The next one down, or shall I skip it was that level. I mean, obviously, Alex has got a relationship there. He's got a job to do. And, Gary's obviously instrumental in helping him. So I've got no criticism of it. It was just the way and manner of it was just so similar, but to it in the fact that this is the question I'm going to answer and this is how I'm going to answer it. Thank you very much. Yes, we're done now. Thank you. Goodbye.
Well, there is something that we don't need to be speculative about that's happened in the news today as well. Junior Vavai, our friend from the quiz question, has signed a new 2-year contract extension to remain at Hull Kingston Rovers until the end of at least the 2020 season. So you said that the news was announced in a sort of interesting way?
Yeah, I loved it. It was announced on Twitter probably about 4 or 5 o'clock, I think I saw it. And they got his son to record a little video saying, yes, my dad will be staying for the next 2 years. And then it broke into the official club interview with him saying that, yep, he's agreed to. He originally had a 1-year option, but he's instead just signed a brand new 2-year contract. So he'll be rocking up for the next 2 years, which is brilliant.
As resident Hull KR fan, how do you feel about that news? Is it a good re-signing?
Yeah, brilliant re-signing.
I think he's
done very well. He has given it a lift when he's been in. Obviously, he had a spell out of injury, but I think he's a player who gets 5% more out of other players just by being there. So I'm really happy that we've got him for another 2 years and hopefully some time after that if form and fitness allow.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty exciting, powerful, flashes of the spectacular in attack, and he's always committed to what he's doing in attack so much that the bounce of the ball often tends to go his way as well because of that. He's not exactly rock solid all the time in defence, but
no, but it's very entertaining. So you could say he's the most entertaining player we've got.
Yeah, definitely. I enjoy seeing what he does. He's a threat. He's always a threat. In the qualifiers, he'll be an absolute dynamic player if that's where the Rovers.
And he's very much a people's player and a fans player because you see him sort of come along and how he sort of got into the club, and you see you've seen on game days all his kids are up there in the kit and looking like they're loving it, and he just looks like he's enjoying himself as well, and that's one of the best bits of it.
Yeah, someone who buys into the ethos there. Okay, let's rattle through the rest of the week's news then. Tim, we'll start with England, who are going to face France at the Leigh Sports Village on Wednesday, October the 17th, a 7:45pm kickoff in preparation for the Autumn International Series against New Zealand. It's good to have another international fixture in the calendar. It's certainly one that Heartland fans should be able to try and get to, with Leigh being well within the Heartlands.
Yeah, it is. My one question about this, and it was raised actually by Mikey Shires at the Bears on the BBC podcast, was